I must say that this is very crucial for patients to understand the purpose and the whole process of clinical trials. And also what we struggle in Poland, and I think in many European countries, is first of all the access to clinical trials. But there's so little clinical trials, for example, in Poland compared to UK or France. Only 4 out of 100 patients have access to clinical trials. So this is the huge problem. And second of all, the information about them, because we do not have any national web portal or database of ongoing clinical trials. So we have to use portals with other languages like clinicaltrials.gov, and this is what we are doing as patient organization. We support patients with this kind of information. And also there is a problem with recruiting these patients, because if there is no information, then the patients cannot reach the clinical trials. So this is like the very difficult situation. So we really want to change that perspective.
Yeah, in the United States, I know we struggle with access to those clinical trials, particularly for patients who don't live near a treatment center. And so it becomes that you really have to provide some support too to patients if you want to get the patients that you're looking for into those trials. And it's not easy.
And also we know that when the disease is progressing, this is what patients, what's important for patients to really access to clinical trials or get another treatment, so he can wait, for example, for another clinical trial. And many patients live for many years now. It's not just temporary, it's really long term.
One thing I'd comment on clinical trials is we do a lot of clinical trials. I think today in over 30 countries we have clinical trials of thousands of patients on clinical trials today, and other companies are similar. But something I've learned is clinical trials are not just a physician and a patient. There's a lot of other stakeholders that are driving that clinical trial process in that respective hospital or country. Unfortunately, there's a tremendous amount of bureaucracy in clinical trials. There's informed consent that drives a lot of and you being a lawyer, you can relate to some of this. There's a lot of challenges to get a trial accepted in the market, but this is, to me, this is a multifactorial issue that is going to take a lot of stakeholders around the table to say, how can we accelerate clinical trials? One idea I hear more often is, why not just have one central IRB? You know, why do we continue to have IRBs at a national level, a state level? I mean, there's multiple levels of IRBs, and they all get tweaked along the way, and all that's doing is delaying a clinical trial for patients. So I think we need to sort of step back and say, how can we have more clinical trial sites that are available and more geographic representation? As a manufacturer, we need that geographic representation as well, so we're not just looking at one part of the world.
Well, involving patients in the design of clinical research and trials is something key, because that's how we can really contribute into a meaningful process and help the very design address some of the unmet needs, but also help patients in the community understand what the benefits of these efforts would be, which is a huge unmet need currently. There's obviously some sort of taboo still going on around clinical research and design, but the only way that we could change this is to actually involve the patient community in this process from day one.
Yeah, showing that the patients should really be a part of this process, and this is what we are working in Poland with the Clinical Trials Registering Office. So there will be patients in the council, and they will assess all the documents about clinical trials, the information on leaflets and so on, so that they will be understandable and really informational for patients.
If we think of the drug development timelines, so much of that timeline is recruiting and enrolling patients in trials. And to your point, you know, it's definitely single-digit percentage of patients that are in clinical trials, those patients that are eligible. And I also agree with you, being in a clinical trial can be a great thing, because what you're getting is standard of care. and you're being treated according to all international guidelines. So patients should walk in there, they should feel honored to be in a clinical trial, and those physicians should also feel honored to put a patient in a clinical trial. You know, because a lot of work has normally been done up to that point to see if the drug is safe and effective, and of course now we're trying on broader patient populations to see that. But I agree with you.
Yeah, I think it will be very beneficial then when you can show that you really cooperate with patients and that we all see the needs that we are going to support. So helping patients and healthcare, and not only all profits. So we are not. So there's a greater cause for this. So this is not something that this is just done by a company. This is something to really help everyone.